Hey everyone, my name is Abby Chan. I am the registered dietitian at Evolve Flagstaff. And we've given talks before about meal prepping, but this one's a little bit different because obviously we're in totally different times right now. We're not juggling a million different things in the same sense as we were pre-COVID, but now we're more concerned and worried about how do we preserve food? How do we actually plan for a week or 2 weeks when we're trying to limit our trips to the store and trips out when we're trying to stay home. So that's what this presentation is going to be about, of how to actually plan that, how to shop, how to go about that, and then how to prep and how to store food. First and foremost, I want to kind of address a topic I've seen a lot, and one of them is that you're going to gain the COVID-19 or that you're stress eating or things like that. And I want you to know that this is completely normal. We as humans are used to a lot of variety in our lives, and right now we don't have a lot of variety. We're hopefully at home and not a lot is changing. So know that it's totally normal for you to be eating different foods than you normally would. It's okay to find comfort in food. The main thing is that food just shouldn't be your only comfort. You should find some other outlets too. Maybe that's getting creative. Maybe that's going outside. But food is probably going to look different now than it did before. And know that that's okay. And we need to be really flexible around that too. So the goals of today are to, again, focus on how do we break down planning, budgeting, reusing certain ingredients, shopping, and then also prepping. I want to go over a few do's and don'ts first. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to plan for things that you enjoy. Right now, this is not the time to be dieting, trimming, cutting, or anything like that, because if we tend to do that, we actually aren't just losing weight or mass, we're also losing and decreasing our immunity. So, right now is not the time to focus on trying to lose weight or get super cut. Now is the time to really optimize your food intake and really start to optimize your body and support your immune system as much as you can. Building on that, there are no foods that are going to boost your immune system. There's only foods that necessarily support it. So that's one thing, is that we want to plan for things that we enjoy, and now is not the time to be cutting or going crazy on limiting things. You should also find food that everyone enjoys in your household right now. Some people may be living in households that are much larger than they're used to. Maybe you went home to be with family so that you weren't quarantined alone. Maybe you have had other people join you in your own house. So try to find some common ground on food. Try to find some things that everyone enjoys. Same, and then the next thing is to buy things that you will actually use. So right now, if you go into any of the bean sections or dried goods sections, they're completely cleared out. And a lot of people don't even know what to do with those things or eat those things anyway. So don't do that. In Arizona, SNAP and WIC, which is basically food assistance for low-income families or those for women's, infants, and children's. Those checks, at least for SNAP, those I think drop on April 4th. So try not to go to the grocery store from the 1st through the 4th so that grocery stores have enough time to stock up again before these families who have may be running on fumes for the last week. Try not to stock up on all of maybe some of their main staples too. So if you can avoid it, try to avoid the grocery store in the first week of the month, especially right now because there's many more people who are in those assistance programs. And the next thing that you should do is become really storage savvy. So we're going to dive into that on how to do that today and how to do that in a really smart way. The don'ts that you shouldn't do are pretty clear. Don't hoard food or goods. Again, this goes back to that whole financial assistance thing too, is some of us are in privileged situations to where we can easily drop 300, 400, thousands of dollars in food and stock up at once, but a lot of other people aren't. So make sure that we're saving some for those who may not have the same means that we do. And same things, don't buy foods that you don't know what to do with, like all of those canned goods or those dried beans that you're never actually going to cook with. Don't buy them. Save them for people who actually know what to do with them and how to utilize them. So I want to go into Nutrition 101 really quickly first, just so that you get an idea of, if you've never heard this information before, of like how to actually balance a meal. So carbs, let's start there. Carbs are the main source of energy for your brain, your muscles, and basically every single cell in your body. All carbohydrates get broken down into glucose. That glucose is used for energy, and that glucose can then be stored in our liver and our muscles for later use. Carbs are generally thought of as something that is quote unquote bad in our society. They are not. They are great, especially if you're an athlete or you like to be active. Carbs are a necessity. They are a great source, especially a lot of the grains. They're a great source of vitamins, especially your B vitamins, as well as fibers, things like that. Fiber can help keep our gastrointestinal tract happy, and especially in these times too, we want to keep our GI systems really strong and really happy so they can fight anything that may come into them. So carbs, everything that's going to be on the next 2 or 3 slides, anything that is in this kind of darker green color are all things that can be stored and stored for a long period of time. Most of them are all dried goods or canned, so know that you can store them for a long period of time as long as you're storing them safely in a closed, airtight container, and away from any rodents or things like that if they're in your garage. So just make sure that they're up off the floor, stored in an airtight container, and you can use them for a long period of time. We'll talk about storage a little bit later. The next thing that we need to think about is vegetables. When we're thinking about the composition of meals, is vegetables. This is something that I've had multiple conversations with clients this week when they're kind of in survival mode about the foods that they can scrounge together, and this is the thing that's most commonly missing. Vegetables are also the thing that seem to be widely available in the stores right now. Again, a lot of the dried goods or canned goods are gone, but we have a lot of fresh vegetables. So know that you should continue to eat vegetables even though it's a pandemic. They are very, very essential to provide you with all of the micronutrients, so your vitamins and minerals that are going to help, again, support your immune system, not boost it, but definitely support it. Again, on here, all of the things that are in that darker green kind of highlight are all the things that are going to stay for a long time. The last thing here is proteins. So proteins are essential for, an adequate protein is essential for making sure that you don't get sick, actually. So some of the main things that we know that are actually very supportive of your immune system are, number one is decreasing stress. Number two is sleeping. Number three is eating enough. And then number four is definitely protein. So when I worked in the hospital for a long time, we would see people come in and we would assess them for protein calorie malnutrition, which means that yes, maybe they could be deficient in calories, but oftentimes they were deficient in protein. And so people who maybe seemed like they were in a normal size or even larger size body were actually starving from the inside out, and their immune systems could not be supported. So you want to make sure you're having enough protein. You need to have protein with every meal. Do not mega dose your protein just once in the day. Make sure that you're getting about 3 to 4 ounces if it's like a meat-based protein, or about anywhere from probably about a cup of some of the plant-based proteins per meal. Obviously, if it's nuts, it's going to be a little different. You don't need a cup of nuts. Although they're great for you. Again, looking at the things that are going to last a little bit longer, all of the plant-based proteins are going to last for a long time. Whether they're dried or stored in a certain way, they can last in your refrigerator for a long time. So that's really great if you are plant-based or a vegetarian. Some other options for anyone who's a little bit more animal-based is eggs are going to last for a long time. Any sort of yogurt will. Protein powder can be a really great staple, especially if you're trying to really stretch out your budget a little bit. They're expensive up front, but they can be great additions to things as well. And then cheese will generally last for a long time too. So in this, I'm not covering all of the macros, but I'm covering which are basically the macronutrients are your carbs, protein, and fat. But generally, when we're building meals, we have fat in our meals, whether that's coming from a meat base, whether that's coming from oil from cooking, if you're adding dressing onto something. I'm a huge proponent of fats. Fats are important for making you feel satiated and full and satisfied after a meal. But I'm not going to go into deeply about how much you need because we could get into the weeds quickly there. So I just want to talk about the main things that you need to have in your meal is you need to have about 3 to 4 ounces of protein. Again, that's about, if it's a meat-based protein, that's about the size of the palm of your hand or maybe up to your first knuckle and about the thickness of your hand. I find that most chicken breasts, unless they're really large, are about 6 ounces. So that can be a really great way to make your meat, especially in this time, stretch a little bit longer, is probably consume a little bit less than you normally would, and you can allow that to stretch longer as well. So you need about 3 to 4 ounces of protein per meal. You need about 1 to 2 handfuls of carbs. If you're an athlete, you're going to need way more than that. Probably 2 to even 4 handfuls of a carbohydrate-rich food, which is going to be a lot of your starchy vegetables, your grains, things like that. If you're plant-based, this is different as well because a lot of your proteins are your protein carbs. So just kind of work with that a little bit. But know that you always need to have a vegetable with your meal as well. That's going to be basically your multivitamin in food form. So, looking at some budget friendly nutritious items of like how to actually eat really well and healthfully, also on a budget, which is also going to be a lot of the things that are generally off the shelves right now. So, for a long time, we've been told that processed foods are all bad, which isn't true. Canned foods and frozen foods can be a really important part to a budget friendly and healthful diet. Frozen foods and some of the canned foods are even more nutritious than some of the foods you may find on the shelf, especially if we're trying to find things that are off season or maybe not picked at their peak. All of those canned and frozen fruits and vegetables are picked at their peak and they're processed right away. So they're actually going to retain the majority of their nutrient profile. So that's really cool. So yes, you can. Not all processed foods are bad, and a lot of these canned or dried things can be really great staples. Whole grains, again, they're going to be a great source of B vitamins, fiber, and even protein. So know that you're getting a little bit of protein from your whole grains as well. You'll get more nutrients from your whole grains as opposed to your more processed grains, your more white grains. Not that they're bad. You're just going to get a little bit more bang for your buck there in whole grain. And eggs are going to be really budget friendly, as well as nuts if you can buy them in bulk. I know that Natural Grocers does a really great job at stocking their nuts. You can find those in the freezer section, and that's going to be one way that you can maintain the freshness on nuts is by putting them in the refrigerator or in your freezer. Other things that are very budget friendly are canned tuna and salmon. So when we're looking at the shelf life and kind of the ability that food has to stay fresh, it's going to be, I kind of broke it down into weeks worth. A lot of these things, especially in the 3 week thing, can last longer if they're stored properly. So potatoes, onions, garlic, all of those things, as long as they're stored in a dark, cool place. So that could be in your pantry. That could be a space in your garage, again, that's covered away from any little insects or mice or anything like that. But those can last for a long period of time. Apples, if they're stored correctly, can last for even up to can last up to multiple months. So know that if you're storing your food properly, it can last for a long time. Carrots can definitely last for about 3 weeks if they're stored properly again, and if they're washed. Dried goods will stay generally forever. Frozen vegetables and fruits will last for a long as they're not getting freezer burned and again packaged correctly. And then cured meats will last for a long time. With cabbage, the 2 to 3 week realm is a lot of your like cabbages and more like hardier winter vegetables that you normally find. Cabbage, beets, cauliflower, again, the carrots are going to be on there again. Any sort of citrus is going to last for a long period as well. Yogurt, bacon, eggs, tofu, tempeh. Tofu and tempeh will last for much longer than 2 weeks too. It just depends on what form it's in. Real quick, I just want to talk about carrots and beets in particular, anything that's maybe going to come with greens on it. Whenever, or with all of your produce, whenever you bring it into the house, you want to wash it first, and we'll go more deeply into this. But you want to wash it first, and then you want to make sure that it's pretty dry. Some great ways to maintain any of those vegetables that have those leafy greens on the end of them, if it's a beet stalk or if it's carrots, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are chopping off the ends of those and either getting rid of them. You can add the greens into salads really easily. You can compost them. You can do whatever you want. But what will happen is if you leave those greens on, they will actually start to pull water out of these really water-rich vegetables, and that will cause them to get really floppy and soggy and sad. So make sure you're cutting your greens off. If you really want to keep them fresh for a longer period of time, we have these reusable cotton bags that you can use. You can buy them. I made them. But generally, in your crisper, so in your veggie drawers, a lot of your vegetables will like it to be more crisp. And then a lot of your like fruits and things like that can tolerate a little bit less crispness. So what you want to do for a lot of your vegetables is you can either prep them in a Tupperware. You can wash them, chop them, and then put them in a Tupperware with either a little towel at the bottom that may be somewhat damp, and that can help preserve some of your vegetables and keep some of that crispness and water content up. Certain things I'll talk kind of about the difference between the two. So a lot of the hardier vegetables, you want those to be crispy and somewhat wet, not soaking, but somewhat wet. And you want your like berries or softer things to be stored away from moisture. Nothing should be sopping in water ever, though that'll definitely make it go a little bit more quickly. And then some of the foods that'll last about 1 to 2 weeks are going to be broccoli, kale, pears, any sort of fresh meat. It's about a week on that. You want to use that pretty quickly, and avocados. Things that don't last are your watery vegetables. So some of those are going to be your cucumbers, tomatoes. I generally recommend if you want to use those for a longer period of time, is to chop them up, prep them, store them in an airtight container with as minimal water as you can. So the watery vegetables don't like more water. A lot of the more crisp vegetables like it to at least have a little bit of that water. Berries don't love water, so wash those. Make sure those are really dry before you put them in the refrigerator. And then bananas, those will last for a long time, but the thing about bananas is they will emit a gas and they will start to ripen everything else that's around them. So if you keep your bananas on the counter with your avocados, those avocados are going to turn a lot more quickly than you'd like them to. Sometimes that can be a good thing. If you have a harder avocado and you want to use it soon, that can be great. But if not, then you want to keep your bananas elsewhere or away from other foods that you don't want to ripen. Also, anything that's supposed to be kept on the counter, which I'll show in a second, anything like your avocados, or anything that you feel like is getting too ripe sitting out on the counter, what you can do is you can pop that in the fridge and that'll slow down that decay process and will make them last a little bit longer. So if you get the perfect avocado at the store and you don't have a chance to eat it, just pop it in the fridge and it'll last for a few more days. So here's how to really start planning. You want to plan for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks because people are probably snacking more than usual, which is totally fine. But especially if you right now are at home and you have kids at home, or maybe again, more people under your roof than normal, you need to plan for basically everyone having 3 meals plus probably 2 to 3 snacks per day. What you want to do then is before you start planning or coming up with everything that or at least coming up with your shopping list, you want to shop your pantry and your freezer first. So you want to make sure you're utilizing a lot of the ingredients that you already have. So maybe that's just taking either meat or things out of your freezer, or soups that you had left over. You can put those in your freezer. Maybe it's taking those out for that night, or for use soon. So that's one thing, is you want to shop your pantry, your freezer. You want to look for those things you maybe don't normally buy on a regular basis. That could be oats. That could be a variety of different things that aren't maybe, again, those weekly occurs. Then you want to make a shopping list based on, obviously, first your menu. So what are those breakfast, lunch, and dinners plus 2 to 3 snacks for everyone in your family? Again, you want to plan. You can go back to those first few slides of how to plan foods, of the how do you have enough protein, enough carbs, enough vegetables in every meal, to make that accessible. So you want to make a shopping list based on your grocery store's layout. So I know a lot of people will break it down of all your produce goes together. But what I really like to do is I like to think about my grocery store that I go to and the layout of it. Know that your grocery stores may be different now, set up in COVID times, because I know that Sprouts, at least in our town, has an entrance and an exit. So you can't go in and out. So the normal way that we normally go is a little bit different. So I like to lay out my shopping list in order of what I'm going to come across, so I can get in, get out. I'm not having to cross through the store a million different times, and I can make this as quick as possible. The next thing is you want to go shopping. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Then storing and prepping. And then you want to create a list as you move through this. Create a list of some of your go-to meals. So go-to meals are meals that we call at Evolve as your kind of quick and easy go-to. So those are things that can be made in under about 15 or 20 minutes. And they have to be made from ingredients that you generally have around the house. So that could be, maybe for us, it's black bean soup. And they also have to be balanced in protein, carbs, and vegetables. So try to find a few of those things that are big staples for your family, so that on these nights when you're super exhausted, possibly from working from home and having to homeschool and do whatever you're doing, make sure that you are creating a list of those meals so that you don't have to think about it as much. And I know everyone says make a list before you go to the grocery store, but now it's more important than ever, because if you forget something, you really don't want to risk going to the store again for that one thing. So make sure you're writing everything down, make sure you're crossing it off, make sure you're having a system before you go in. So let's talk about shopping. Shopping first, again, bring your list organized by the location of the items in your store. The next thing is bring your own hand sanitizer if you have it. Most stores don't have it. So they have like the cart sanitizer, which is great, but bring some of your own hand sanitizer. I think it's great before, if you're touching meats, just so you're not getting cross-contamination. If you're just like touching a bunch of different things, just try to keep yourself safe. Don't touch your face once you're in the grocery store. If you want to wear a mask, that's a great way to not touch your face, because I think it discourages it a little bit. So that can be a really great thing too. The CDC just released that masks can be effective in transmission and spread of the virus. So that's definitely an option when you're going out and about. You want to pack clean, reusable shopping bags. So I know that some grocery stores are not bagging your groceries in reusable bags right now, and that's okay. You can bag your own bags. That would be fine. And you want to make sure that you're washing your bags in between uses. Since you're probably only going to the grocery store about once a week now, maybe once every 2 weeks, you should have time to wash those bags and have them be clean. You don't want to buy any mixed or damaged or ripped packages when you're at the grocery store. That just leads to possibly more cross-contamination of foods. It can damage cans. That's where you can get certain foodborne illnesses from damaged cans. So try not to do that as much as possible. And if you're going on multiple errands, speaking of food safety, is bring a cooler, especially if you're going to have a lot of those perishable goods of like eggs or milk or meat. You want to make sure that you can keep those cool and safe through transport. The last thing, if this is really stressful for you, just get grocery delivery. Instant Cart, I know that in Flagstaff they do in most major cities. So that can be one way that you can utilize technology and some resources so that you don't actually physically have to go to the store and somebody else can do it for you. All right, so let's look at where to store your foods because I think that that's important. Again, um, when we're thinking of refrigerating versus not refrigerating, things that can be refrigerated just fine are going to be all of the things on the left side of the screen, and all the things that shouldn't be are going to be all on the right side of the screen. So again, a lot of those like watery vegetables, such as like cucumbers, those can be stored in just fine along with your lettuces. Your broccoli can get really wilty if it's not stored around something. So if it's a whole vegetable, generally keep it in a crisper as much as possible. If it's your fruits, you can separate those, put them in your other crisper drawer. They don't have to be as crisp. It just depends on, again, the water content of the fruit or vegetable. Things you don't want to refrigerate are your avocados unless they're about to turn. Your bananas, again, they will make everything else in your fridge rot more quickly. Nectarines and some of your stone fruits like nectarines and peaches don't love being refrigerated. And then tomatoes really don't like being refrigerated. Know that once you've cut anything or processed anything, it should then be stored in an airtight container or covered. So if you have a tomato, great, it should be stored out of the fridge, but then once you use it and cut it, it should be stored in the fridge covered. Again, keep your potatoes, onions, garlic in a cool, dry place. You can keep them separate so that their flavors don't end up mixing as well. We keep our potatoes, unfortunately, right now in a very sunny spot, in a hanging basket. And so it's not the best because our potatoes will end up sprouting really quickly. So any sort of access to light for potatoes, they will just sprout and start that photosynthesis process. And then you could, I guess, start a potato garden if you wanted to. I think actually bananas should be stored just about anywhere else. Again, I don't think they should be stored by a lot of things that you don't want to ripen. Here, when we're looking at the process of prepping, the first thing you want to do when you get home from the grocery store is you want to obviously wash your hands. Wash your hands, wash all of your produce in a clean sink. You don't need anything fancy to wash your vegetables. They do make certain fruit and vegetable washes, which are fine. They can break down certain fruits and vegetables because they're slightly acidic, so they can break them down a little bit. You don't have to have them. Some simple water is actually pretty effective. And you want to then wash your reusable bags. The next thing is you want to separate your refrigerated goods, dry goods, and then things that are going to go in the freezer. Put them where they need to be. The next thing is when you start prepping, again, certain vegetables will do really well prepped, and that can increase their shelf life. So that can be, if you have whole carrots, make some carrot sticks. That can be a really easy way to also give kids access to easy snacks, especially if they're young, so that they don't have to pull a knife out or something like that, that you can just have them easy prepped and ready to go for them. If you're breaking down meats into smaller portions, that's the thing to do right after the grocery store, just so that you're getting everything organized. While you're doing that, you can also make a batch of grains or beans to help, again, prolong some of those foods throughout the week. The next thing is obviously eating. So in this time of disconnection and kind of hyper connection, I do invite you to remove distractions while you're eating. Try to put your phone away, turn the TV off, and try to just decompress a little bit and be mindful and take a moment with your food. Another thing is if you have people in your house, conversate around food, not revolving around coronavirus or other stressors. So just make sure you're taking some time and being nice and gentle with yourself. So here's how you want to think about prepping foods for freezing them. So if it's say you had extra soup that you're not going to be able to eat that week, put it into individual containers, and then you can just store that in your freezer. It's easier to thaw smaller containers of things, especially if someone's going to grab it and go or use it for a lunch or something like that. That can be an easy thing, so it's not this big batch. So separate them into smaller containers, whether it's Tupperwares, or you can even use even like sour cream containers or yogurt containers, things like that. You want to make sure that anytime you're freezing something, it is wrapped in either freezer paper, some sort of like plastic bag, or freezer bags or foil. You want to make sure that you do that so that they're not going to get freezer burned. If you found an abundance of vegetables at the store, and you want to be able to freeze them on your own because they were out of frozen vegetables, you can easily freeze things on your own. So the way that you want to do most vegetables is you want to blanch them first, which means just get them in some hot boiling water, cool them down, get some icy water on the side so that once you get them out of the boiling water, cool them directly and put them into that icy cold water. That'll stop the cooking process. It'll keep the color of the vegetables really nice and vibrant. And then what you want to do is separate them on a sheet pan, so a cookie tray basically. Separate them, pop them in the freezer. They should be frozen in about 30 minutes to an hour, and then you can put those individual frozen pieces into a Ziploc bag or some other sort of storage container so it's not freezing in one big lump. Same thing with any fruits. Maybe you're finding fruits on sale right now. That can be a thing that you can also freeze, is again, put them on that big cookie tray or sheet tray, spread them apart, do not freeze them in one clump, spread them apart, let them freeze individually, and then put them in a bag and put them away. Lastly, I really want to talk about food safety because the last thing you want right now is someone going to the hospital because of a foodborne illness or because of food poisoning, because our hospital systems are super maxed out, and we should just be practicing overall food safety because that's also it's going to be the thing that's going to keep our food safe from any viruses. It's going to cook off any viruses or bacteria, and it's going to make sure that we're not growing any of those bacteria as well. So all of your ground meats and poultry should be kept once they're cooked above 165 for at least 15 seconds. They should be cooked to that temperature. Cold food should be kept cold, and the danger zone of foods is 40 degrees to 145 degrees. So don't let things sit out for prolonged periods of time, especially if they have an at-risk food, which is like a dairy, eggs, or meat product. Make sure that those foods are either kept cold or kept hot. You want to wash your hands, and even we always just wash all of our utensils before we're switching between meat or fresh foods. I always prep all of my fresh stuff first. So all of my veggies, all of those go first, and then I will generally wash my cutting board and then start prepping meats last, just to make sure that there's no cross contamination. I don't want chicken juice on my salad. It's just gross. The next thing you can do is when you're batch prepping, so say you're prepping a ton of vegetables, you're chopping a ton, it takes the same amount of time to cut one onion as it does five. So if you know you're going to use 5 onions that week, just chop them. It's a lot easier. It's also easier if you're going to keep those like foods together. Keep onions together in a Tupperware. Keep them away from carrots. Otherwise, your carrots will taste like onions. So keep like foods together if you can, if you're batch prepping. And then most foods will last 5 to 7 days as long as they're prepared properly, cooled properly, and they're not hanging out in those danger zones for extended periods of time. So I hope you guys learned something through this whole talk. If all else fails, Evolve Eats is still here. We are delivering to your door. So if you don't want to cook, if you don't want to grocery shop, we will totally do that for you, and bring you prepared meals to your door. So hopefully you learned some really savvy ways that you can start to think about actually planning your meals, actually having a system down for that, especially if you have more people in your house. Hopefully you learned a little bit about Nutrition 101. Hopefully you learned about how to get in and out of the grocery store as fast as possible. Make a list, make a map, make a plan, bring some hand sanitizer, don't touch your face, wash your hands when you get home. And hopefully you guys can disconnect and really find some joy in food in this time. Hopefully slow down a little bit, and really start to just take care of yourselves. Again, there's no food that's going to be the cure-all for coronavirus or any other sort of illness, but a lot of these foods can help support our system. So if you have any questions, reach out, let us know. We are here for you guys, and take care.